In the sprawling Bel Air mansion, silence reigned, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of a vintage grandfather clock. I unzipped my suitcase on the plush walk-in closet carpet and began folding my clothes into it one by one. I was 8 months pregnant, my belly heavy and cumbersome, making it difficult to bend down. Yet I moved with slow, deliberate precision without making a single unnecessary sound. Down in the living room, Alexander Kensington had just walked out. He had a business dinner tonight. Before leaving, he didn't even glance my way. "Ma'am, are you going somewhere?" Martha, the housekeeper, walked in holding a mug of warm milk and honey. Seeing the suitcase on the floor, she froze. Without looking up, Grace said softly, "Martha, please leave. I want to be alone." Martha hesitated, set the mug on the side table, and quietly exited. When she was gone, Grace slowly lifted her head, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror. Swollen face, dull skin, wearing a simple maternity dress that made her look more like the Help. Was this really the wife of the billionaire Alexander Kensington? No, she was merely the replacement Alexander had found for Vanessa Sinclair. Grace recalled what had happened earlier that afternoon. She had been preparing her hospital bag. With only a month left until her due date, she needed to get everything ready. In the storage closet of his home office, there was a sleek storage box. Thinking it contained some baby clothes they had received, she opened it. But instead of baby clothes, she found a black moleskin notebook. The notebook was old, its corners frayed, but it had clearly been cherished. It was obvious it was opened frequently. Grace turned to the first page. Written in elegant handwriting were the words, "Vanessa, today is the 1st of September, 2012, the day I met you." Her hand stopped. Vanessa, Alexander's first love. The woman who had married an overseas tech billionaire and now lived abroad. She turned the page. Page 2. Vanessa loves lavender lattes. 3 pumps of vanilla. Page 3. Vanessa is terrified of thunderstorms. Every time it rains, she hides in my arms. Page 4. Vanessa says the scent of lavender calms her, so I bought out the entire line of hand creams from her favorite brand. Page 5. When Vanessa cries, the tip of her nose turns red. It's so cute. Page 6. Today, Vanessa asked me what would happen if we broke up. I told her it would never happen. She smiled, but it felt forced. Page 7, page 8. 12 pages in total. Grace flipped through them one by one, her fingers growing colder with each turn. She had always known there was someone else in Alexander's heart. On their wedding night, he had drank heavily, grabbing her hand in a drunken stupor and calling her Vanessa. She hadn't made a scene. She just gently pulled her hand away and said, "You've had too much to drink." For 3 years of marriage, Alexander had barely touched her. Only when Grandmother Kensington began relentlessly pressuring him for an heir did he reluctantly fulfill his marital duties just once. And she got pregnant. After that, Alexander reverted to his usual self. Leaving early, coming home late, barely speaking to her. He even had his driver take her to her OB-GYN appointments. Grace had always told herself this was normal. High society marriages were about mutual respect and transactional benefits. But today, seeing this notebook, she realized something profound. He was capable of loving someone deeply. He just didn't love her. He poured all his tenderness into this notebook, saving it for a woman who would never return. And who was she? Her name wasn't on a single page. Grace closed the notebook and put it back exactly where she found it. Holding her lower back, she stood up, walked out of the office, and returned to the master suite. Then she opened her suitcase. She wasn't packing a hospital bag. She was packing to leave this house forever. Her phone buzzed, a text from her best friend Lily. "Grace, are you absolutely sure I bought the ticket? Your flight to Chicago is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Grace typed back quickly. "I'm leaving tonight." Lily sent a question mark. "I can't stay here another hour," Grace replied. She turned off her phone and packed faster. She took only a few of her favorite simple pieces of clothing. From her jewelry box, she pulled out the massive diamond engagement ring Alexander had given her and placed it gently on the vanity. It belonged to the Kensington family. She wouldn't take it with her. She took only the personal savings she had managed to set aside over the past 3 years. Not a fortune, but enough to start over in a new city. Grace zipped up the suitcase and rolled it out into the hallway. Martha appeared again, her face etched with worry. "Ma'am, where are you going? Does Mr. Kensington know?" Grace smiled. It was a light, detached smile. "Martha, do me a favor. Pass a message to him." "What is it?" the housekeeper asked nervously. "Tell him he doesn't need to hide that notebook in his study anymore." Martha's face drained of color. Seeing her guilty expression, Grace understood everything. Martha knew. Everyone in this house knew. Vanessa's ghost lived in this mansion, and Grace, the supposed lady of the house, was the only one kept in the dark. She didn't say another word. Taking her suitcase, she headed downstairs. Her low heels clicked against the imported marble floors. Every step was firm. She didn't look back. Downstairs, George, the estate manager, hurried over. "Mrs. Kensington, are you? Call me an Uber, please," Grace cut him off. "I can drive you myself," George offered. "No need." She opened the heavy front doors. The night air of Los Angeles was cool. The quiet, palm tree-lined street stretched out before her, illuminated by dim streetlights. She waited outside for 5 minutes until the black SUV pulled up. The driver helped load her suitcase and asked for the destination. LAX, she said. As the car door closed, she took one final look at the mansion where she had spent the last 3 years. Alexander's Rolls-Royce was still in the garage. He was at his dinner, and who knew when he would be back. "Let's go," she said. The car slowly pulled away. She leaned against the window, resting a hand on her large belly, and whispered softly, "Mia, Mommy is taking you away. From now on, your last name is Lawson. We're never coming back to this house." As the car exited the gated community, a light drizzle began to fall. Drops tapped against the glass, blurring the silhouette of the luxurious estate in the rearview mirror. Grace never looked back. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Alexander. 3 words. "Not coming home." Grace stared at those words for 3 seconds. Then she pulled out the SIM card, snapped it in half, and dropped it into an empty cup in the cup holder. "Driver, please step on it." Speeding through the rainy night toward the airport, Grace closed her eyes, her hand still cradling her baby. The baby kicked as if responding to her. She smiled. For the first time in years, it was a genuine smile. The lights at LAX were blindingly bright. It was a red-eye flight, so the terminal wasn't too crowded. Grace approached the check-in counter and handed over her ID. The airline agent glanced at her belly and asked, "Ma'am, how far along are you?" 32 weeks. The agent looked hesitant. Per airline policy, over 36 weeks requires a doctor's note. At 32 weeks, you are cleared to fly, but I'll need you to sign a liability waiver. No problem. Grace took the pen and signed her name with sweeping, forceful strokes. Every letter was pressed hard into the paper as if she were signing her divorce papers. Actually, she had already left those papers on the vanity right under the diamond ring. She had drafted the document with a lawyer beforehand. The terms were simple. She voluntarily relinquished any claim to the Kensington family assets, demanded no alimony, and asked for only one thing: sole custody of the child who would take her maiden name and have absolutely no ties to the Kensington family. She had signed it. Alexander hadn't yet, but it didn't matter. She didn't need his permission to leave. Boarding pass in hand, Grace moved through TSA security. The business class lane was empty. In the terminal, she bought a cup of warm milk, sat on a bench, and drank it slowly. Her phone was now just a useless piece of metal and glass. But she knew Alexander wouldn't have called anyway. He didn't even remember how many months pregnant she was. How would he notice she had left the house in the middle of the night? Thinking of this, a bitter chuckle escaped her lips. She remembered their wedding. The Kensington family had thrown the most lavish event in the city, renting out the entire Beverly Wilshire and spending millions. She had walked down the aisle in a custom designer gown, and at the end of it stood Alexander, sharp in his tuxedo, handsome as a magazine cover model. Grace had thought, "This is the man I'm spending my life with." But when she reached him and he slipped the ring onto her finger, she saw that his eyes were completely empty. He was looking at her, but looking right through her. Later, she realized he was looking for Vanessa. Alexander and Vanessa had been college sweethearts. Vanessa's family had been on the verge of bankruptcy. Grandmother Kensington vehemently opposed the union, calling Vanessa a gold digger. Alexander had fought with his family over her and moved out for 6 months. And then Vanessa vanished. Rumor had it she married a tech billionaire in Silicon Valley who was far wealthier than Alexander. Alexander searched for her for 3 months to no avail. After that, he became a block of ice, distant, detached, indifferent to everything. Terrified he would remain a bachelor forever, Grandmother Kensington hastily arranged a series of matchmaking dinners. Grace was one of the candidates. Her family owned a regional chain of grocery stores, upper middle class, but certainly no billionaires. The old matriarch liked Grace for her modesty, obedience, and quiet demeanor. Grace's parents were thrilled to align with the Kensingtons, and so she married him. No love, no dates before the wedding, just a formalized engagement. The only full sentence Alexander spoke to her on their wedding day was, "I don't have feelings for you, but I will make sure you are taken care of." Grace had thought, that's okay. Feelings can grow over time. Only now did she understand that some people lock their hearts the moment one specific person leaves and no one else is ever allowed in. The intercom announced boarding for her flight to Chicago. Grace threw her cup in the trash, gripped her suitcase, and walked toward the gate with unwavering steps. Seeing her condition, a flight attendant kindly bumped her to a bulkhead seat in first class for extra legroom. Grace thanked her, sat down, and buckled her seatbelt. As the plane taxied down the runway, the glittering lights of Los Angeles faded behind them. She placed a hand on her belly. "Mia, it's not a long flight. Be a good girl, okay?" The baby kicked. Grace closed her eyes. She was so incredibly tired. Over the past 3 years, she hadn't had a single night of peaceful sleep. It wasn't just her body that was exhausted. It was her soul. Waking up next to a man who didn't love her, pretending to be happy, answering her mother-in-law's invasive questions with a polite smile, it was enough. The moment the plane lifted off the tarmac, Grace's tears finally fell. She made no sound, just wept silently. The flight attendant walked by, asking if she needed a blanket. Grace shook her head and wiped her face with her sleeve. There was nothing to cry about. Leaving a man who didn't love you was a victory, a rebirth. Meanwhile, back at the Bel Air estate, Alexander returned from his business dinner at 2 a.m. He had been drinking but wasn't drunk. He had a high tolerance. The driver dropped him off, and he walked inside. The house was pitch black. Even the hallway sconces were off. He frowned. "Martha." No answer. He turned on his phone flashlight and walked upstairs. Passing the master bedroom, he paused. Grace was usually asleep by now, but she always left a dim light on in the hallway so he wouldn't trip in the dark. Tonight, there was nothing. Pushing the door open, he flipped the switch. The massive bed was perfectly made. Nobody had slept in it. He froze. He checked the bathroom. Empty. The closet. The lights were on, but no one was there. Alexander scanned the room and instantly realized something was wrong. Her pink suitcase was missing. It usually sat in the far corner of her closet section. Half of her casual clothes were gone. On the vanity sat her jewelry box, and on top of it, an envelope. He walked over. On the envelope were the words, "Divorce Agreement." His heart dropped like a stone. He ripped it open. A printed sheet of paper read, "I, Grace Lawson, due to irreconcilable differences, voluntarily dissolve my marriage to Alexander Kensington. I relinquish all claims to the Kensington estate and request no spousal support. The unborn child will remain under my sole custody, take my maiden name, and have no association with the Kensington family, effective upon signing." At the bottom was her signature. Next to the paper sat her wedding ring. Alexander stared at the letter, his hands beginning to shake. He pulled out his phone and called her. "The subscriber you have dialed is unavailable." He called again. Same automated voice. He immediately dialed Martha. She answered after 3 rings. "Where is she?" Alexander's voice was like ice. Martha's voice trembled. "Sir." "She left. She said she was going to the airport." "When?" "Around 11 p.m. I tried to have George drive her, but she insisted on taking an Uber. Before she left, she asked me to tell you something." "What?" Martha hesitated. She said, "You don't need to hide that notebook in your study anymore." Alexander's face went completely white. He hung up, sprinted down the hall to his office, tore open the storage closet, and pulled out the black notebook. Inside were the pages he had filled with memories of Vanessa. He had forgotten it was even there. He had forgotten Grace was going to be looking for baby items to pack her hospital bag. He had forgotten everything. He threw the notebook against the wall, leaning heavily on his mahogany desk, struggling to breathe. Then he grabbed his car keys and bolted out of the house. George, the driver, was still outside. Seeing his boss looking feral, he panicked. "Mr. Kensington, what's wrong?" "The airport." Now Alexander roared. The SUV sped out of Bel Air. In the back seat, Alexander repeatedly dialed Grace's number. Unavailable. He remembered she was 32 weeks pregnant. She was alone dragging a suitcase through an airport in the middle of the night. If something happened to her, he couldn't bear to think about it. Arriving at LAX, Alexander burst into the terminal, practically shouting at an information desk. "Agent, help me find a passenger. Grace Kensington flying out tonight." Intimidated by his manic appearance, the agent quickly typed into the system. "Sir Grace Kensington boarded a flight to Chicago O'Hare at 1 a.m. The flight has already departed." Alexander froze. He looked at his watch. 1:45 a.m. The plane had been in the air for 45 minutes. He slowly sank to his haunches, burying his face in his hands. He remembered leaving the house that afternoon. Grace had been sitting on the rug, carefully folding tiny baby onesies into neat little stacks. When he walked past, she had looked up at him. Only now did he realize what that look meant. It had been a goodbye. Alexander sat crouched on the airport floor for 10 solid minutes, paralyzed. Passing travelers threw curious glances at the man in the bespoke Tom Ford suit looking utterly broken. Someone recognized him. "Isn't that the CEO of the Kensington Group? What happened?" Alexander heard none of it. His mind was filled only with Grace's face, a face that had never shown him an ounce of resentment. He thought about how she had treated him over the last 3 years. Every morning at 7 a.m., she was up making his breakfast. He liked French press coffee. She learned how to brew it perfectly. He hated wrinkles in his dress shirts. She spent 30 minutes every morning ironing them herself, refusing to let the staff do it, no matter how late he came home. There was always a light on and a warm meal kept fresh in the oven. She never complained, never threw tantrums, never asked for anything. The jewelry she wore was practically forced upon her by his grandmother. Alexander had always thought this was a good arrangement. Convenient, unobtrusive, the perfect billionaire's wife. He assumed she was happy. After all, he gave her status, a luxurious life and wealth most could only dream of. What else could she want? Only today did he realize she never cared about any of that, and what she truly wanted he had never given her. George walked up to him cautiously. "Sir, should we head home? Maybe she'll contact you when she lands." Alexander stood up, his eyes unfocused. "She won't. She broke her SIM card." They rode back in silence. Alexander's fingers nervously drummed against the window. By the time they reached the Bel Air estate, the sun was rising. He walked inside. Martha met him, her eyes red and puffy. "Sir, you're back." "She didn't even take her hospital bag. She just left." "What do you mean she didn't take the hospital bag?" "She told me she was packing it yesterday afternoon. I checked the closet. The bag is completely empty. She only took her personal suitcase." Alexander's chest tightened painfully. She hadn't even prepared to give birth in Los Angeles. She had planned to erase herself from his life completely. He walked upstairs to the master suite. It was exactly as he had left it. The divorce papers sat on the vanity. He picked them up again. His eyes locked onto the final sentence. "The child has no association with the Kensington family." His child. Alexander crumpled the paper and threw it into the trash can. Then, hands shaking, he pulled it back out and smoothed it over. He couldn't sign this. He would never let his child grow up without a father. But the reality hit him. Could he even find her? Chicago was a massive city. If someone wanted to disappear, how could he stop them? He grabbed his phone and called his executive assistant. "Book me on the next flight to Chicago." "Mr. Kensington, you have a crucial board meeting this morning. Cancel it," Alexander barked, slamming the phone down. He went to his closet to pack, but halfway through he stopped. He realized he knew absolutely nothing about Grace. He didn't know her favorite color, her clothing size, her preferred skincare brand. He didn't know what movies she liked or the last name of her best friend. Over 3 years, he had learned less about her than he knew about his entry-level interns. Alexander collapsed onto the closet floor, surrounded by the designer clothes she had left behind. She had taken almost nothing. She left the Birkin bags, the Louboutins. She left all the diamonds, taking only a cheap silver necklace she had bought herself before they met. She wanted nothing from him. She even wanted to take his child, give it her last name, and strip him of his rights as a father. Martha knocked softly, bringing a bowl of oatmeal. "Sir, please eat something. Don't ruin your health." Alexander didn't answer. Martha hesitated, then added, "Sir, the truth is, it's always been very hard for the Mrs. Alexander." Looked up. "What do you mean?" "Do you remember when you went to Europe on a business trip last winter?" Martha asked. Alexander thought for a moment. "Yes. I was gone for a month. She had a 104-degree fever one night," Martha said, her voice wavering. "She was home alone. I told her to go to Cedars-Sinai, but she refused. She said she didn't want the tabloids finding out the Kensington wife was hospitalized, that it might cause a stock panic for you." Alexander's hands balled into fists. "She took Tylenol and toughed it out all night." Martha continued, tears spilling over. "The next day, her fever broke, and she went right back to ironing your shirts. I begged her to rest, but she said you were coming home soon, and she wanted the house perfect for you. Sir, she really loved you, but you never looked at her." "I didn't know," Alexander said hoarsely. "Of course you didn't," Martha cried. "She never let us tell you. She always said you were busy doing important things and shouldn't be bothered with trivial home matters." Alexander stood up and walked to the window. In the sprawling backyard, a row of rose bushes Grace had planted in the spring was in full bloom. He had never even noticed them. He had never noticed anything she did. His phone rang. It was his assistant. Flight booked, sir. Departs at 1:40 p.m. Good. He hung up, walked to the bathroom, and took a shower. Standing in front of the sink, he stared at 2 tubes of toothpaste. One was his mint. The other was hers, strawberry. His tube was almost empty, but she hadn't replaced it because she knew she wouldn't be here to do it anymore. Alexander grabbed the strawberry toothpaste and squeezed it hard in his fist. When he went downstairs, Grandmother Kensington had arrived. The old matriarch stood in the foyer, leaning heavily on her cane, her face flushed with anger. Alexander, explain to me how you let your pregnant wife run away. It's my fault, Grandmother. The old woman struck the marble floor with her cane. Of course, it's your fault. Do you think I don't know about that damn notebook? Do you think I don't know? You're still pining for that gold digger? Vanessa Alexander remained silent. Grace is carrying your child. 8 months. How could you let her fly alone in that condition? If something happens to my great-grandchild, I will never forgive you. I'm sending a team to Chicago immediately. I'll find her, Alexander said grimly. Even if I have to turn the earth upside down, his grandmother glared at him. Think carefully, boy. Grace has a spine. She doesn't want your money, she doesn't want your name. Even if you find her, she might not come back to you. Then I will get on my knees and beg, the old woman scoffed. Hindsight is 20/20. Also things like old love letters. You burn them or lock them in a safe, leaving them in a closet for a pregnant woman to find. You really are an idiot. She turned to leave, tossing one last remark over her shoulder. His phone rang again. It was the director of his Chicago branch. Mr. Kensington, I checked all inbound flights from LA. Grace Lawson arrived at O'Hare at 6:30 a.m. I have a team at the gates, but she might have slipped through a different exit. Watch every exit. Don't let her slip away. Alexander looked at his watch. 10 a.m. He had a few hours before his flight. He ordered George to drive him to the airport. As the car exited Bel Air, Alexander rolled down the window and looked back at the mansion. Did she look back when she left? Probably not, because there was no love left for this place. Chicago, 6 a.m. O'Hare International Airport. When Grace walked out of the terminal, the sun was just beginning to rise over the windy city. The crisp autumn air bit through her sweater. She pulled her coat tighter, rolling her suitcase with one hand and supporting her aching back with the other. She got into a cab and gave an address in the suburbs. It was a short-term rental her best friend Lily had secured for her, small but impeccably clean and safe. The drive took nearly an hour. Lily was already waiting outside the brick apartment building. Seeing Grace step out of the cab looking exhausted and heavily pregnant, Lily burst into tears. Look how thin you've gotten. Lily ran over, hugging her carefully to avoid bumping the baby. I'm not thin, I'm just swollen everywhere else. Grace smiled tiredly. Lily grabbed the suitcase, muttering curses about Alexander all the way up the stairs. I swear to God I should have flown to LA and slapped that bastard across the face. Don't waste your breath, Grace said softly. He has nothing to do with us anymore. Are you absolutely sure you're going to raise the baby alone? Yes, and she will have my last name. She doesn't deserve his. Seeing her fierce determination, Lily nodded. They entered the apartment. It was cozy, the bed made with fresh sheets. Grace sank onto the sofa and let out a long, shuddering breath. I'm finally free. Lily handed her a glass of warm water. What's the plan? First I have the baby. Then I find a job. Start completely over. What if he doesn't sign the divorce papers? It doesn't matter. After a period of separation, I can file for a unilateral divorce. The law in California allows it. Grace rubbed her belly. Mia, we're in our new home. The baby kicked enthusiastically. This girl is just like you. Stubborn and decisive, Lily laughed. Grace smiled back. It was her first truly relaxed smile in days. Meanwhile, Alexander was sitting in a first-class seat on a plane bound for Chicago. His mind was chaos. He closed his eyes trying to sleep, but all he saw was Grace. Not the Grace from yesterday, but the Grace from 3 years ago. At their first meeting at a high-end Beverly Hills cafe, she wore a simple white sundress, her hair down, wearing almost no makeup. She was reading a book in the corner. When he walked in, she looked up and smiled a pure, refreshing smile. Alexander had thought, not bad. At least she isn't annoying. And so he agreed to marry her. On their wedding night, he hadn't touched her. I don't have feelings for you. Be a good missus. Kensington and I'll make sure you're taken care of. Grace had stayed silent for a long time before replying with a single word, okay. No tears, no arguments. He thought she was just being incredibly pragmatic and understanding. Only now did he realize it was disappointment. She had been disappointed from day one. She just chose to suffer in silence. Upon landing at O'Hare, Alexander turned on his phone to dozens of missed calls and texts. He immediately dialed the Chicago branch director. "Mr. Kensington, I'm so sorry. We missed her. She must have jumped straight into a cab. We are pulling security footage, but O'Hare is massive." Alexander punched a pillar outside the terminal. Passing travelers flinched. He took a deep breath. "Keep looking. Bribe whoever you have to at the taxi dispatch. Find out exactly where she went. Use private investigators. Money is no object." Hanging up, he stared at the gray Chicago sky. For the first time in his life, Alexander Kensington felt entirely powerless. He thought he could buy or command anything in the world. Now he couldn't even find his own wife. He went to his luxury hotel downtown. Opening his briefcase, he pulled out the shredded remnants of the black notebook. He had ripped it apart in the car ride to LAX but kept the pieces. Staring at Vanessa's name on a torn scrap of paper, he felt nothing but intense self-loathing. He had wasted years romanticizing a woman who left him for money while ignoring the fiercely loyal woman right next to him. He threw the scraps into the hotel trash can. His phone pinged. A text from his PI. "Sir, we tracked her cab, yellow cab, to a suburban address. Sent it to your email. But the landlord says she already checked out. She was there for a few hours, then a woman picked her up in a private car." Alexander bolted upright. He grabbed his coat, ordered a car, and raced to the address. He found the building manager, an older woman. "Was a pregnant woman here this morning?" "Yeah," the woman said, eyeing his expensive suit suspiciously. "But she left. Where, I don't know, buddy." Her friend picked her up. She looked real upset, crying her eyes out. Her friend said she was taking her somewhere safe to hide from some psycho. "Guess that psycho is you, huh?" The words twisted like a knife in Alexander's gut. He stood on the sidewalk looking at the passing cars. Chicago had millions of people. Finding someone who actively wanted to stay hidden was impossible. Desperate, he found Lily's number in his phone records and dialed it. After 4 rings, Lily picked up. Her tone was pure venom. "Hello, this is Alexander Kensington. Is Grace with you?" Lily laughed coldly. "You have a lot of nerve calling me. I know I was wrong. Please just tell me where she is. I want to apologize to her face." "Apologize? You think torturing her for 3 years is fixed with a, 'sorry, I'll do anything. I'll make it right'? You can't fix this. She doesn't want your money, your status, or you. All she wanted was a husband who loved her, and you couldn't even give her basic respect. Now she doesn't even want your child to have your name. She's a Lawson." Alexander's voice cracked. "She's my daughter. She has nothing to do with the Kensingtons. Do not call this number again." Click. Alexander stood in the freezing Chicago wind, experiencing absolute crushing despair. 2 months later, a high-end apartment in Chicago. Grace was sitting on the sofa, reading a parenting book. Lily walked out of the kitchen holding a bowl of chicken noodle soup. "Can you believe your due date was 3 days ago and you're still just chilling?" Grace rubbed her massive belly. "She likes it in there. She doesn't want to come out into the cold." "She's lazy just like you," Lily teased. Grace reached for the soup bowl but suddenly gasped, dropping it. The porcelain shattered across the hardwood floor. "Grace, what's wrong? My water. I think it's time." Grace gritted her teeth through a sudden vicious contraction. Lily sprang into action, calling 911 with one hand and grabbing the hospital bag with the other. "Breathe, babe. Just breathe." Grace was drenched in sweat, but she didn't scream. She bit her lip, clutching her stomach, whispering to herself, "Mia, Mommy's right here. Don't be scared." The paramedics arrived quickly. In the ambulance, Lily held Grace's hand, debating whether to call Alexander. Ultimately, she left her phone in her pocket. He didn't deserve to know. At the hospital, the doctor checked her and rushed her to the delivery room. As wave after wave of agonizing pain hit her, Grace felt like her body was being ripped apart. Yet she remained stoic. She thought of Alexander, who had never attended a single ultrasound. She remembered sitting in the lavish waiting rooms of Beverly Hills clinics, surrounded by couples feeling entirely alone. She remembered his late-night texts about working late. A fierce, burning anger rose in her chest. With a final agonizing push, the loud, piercing cry of a baby echoed through the room. "Congratulations! It's a beautiful baby girl," the nurse smiled, laying the tiny, screaming infant on Grace's chest. Grace's tears finally overflowed. "Mia, Mommy's here. I'm going to take such good care of you. It's just you and me against the world." The baby stopped crying, opening her dark eyes slightly, as if recognizing the voice. Grace kissed her forehead. From this day forward, she had blood family. The Kensington Empire meant absolutely nothing. Out in the hallway, Lily heard the cries and slid down the wall, weeping with joy. 30 minutes later, Grace was in the recovery room, looking pale but radiant. Lily came in, peered into the bassinet, and sobbed. She's so beautiful. She has your eyes. Stop crying, you're more exhausted than I am. Grace chuckled weakly. Thank you, Lily. I couldn't have done this without you. Are you going to tell him? No, Grace said firmly. If he finds out, he'll bring his army of lawyers and try to take her. With his money, he could ruin me. That's why I'm not staying in Chicago. Once Mia is 3 months old, we're moving. The further, the better. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, at the Kensington Group headquarters, Alexander sat in his penthouse office. Stacks of contracts lay unread. He had lost 20 pounds in the last 2 months. He had hired elite private military contractors and investigators to scour Chicago, but Grace had covered her tracks perfectly. She was a ghost. The heavy oak doors swung open. Grandmother Kensington walked in, leaning on her cane. Look at you. You look like a corpse. Alexander didn't look up. Any news on Grace? No. She hasn't left the country. My contacts at Homeland Security confirm no passport scans. She's here somewhere. There's something else, the old woman said sharply. Vanessa is back. Alexander finally raised his head. She divorced that tech billionaire. Apparently, he caught her cheating and threw her out with nothing because of an ironclad prenup. She came by the estate yesterday asking for you. I will never see her, Alexander said coldly. You better mean that his grandmother snapped. Grace left because of your lingering obsession with that woman. If you bring Vanessa back into my family, I will write you out of the will myself. After she left, Alexander pulled out his phone. He had only one photo of Grace, a candid shot from their wedding day. She was standing under a floral arch, looking over her shoulder with a breathtaking, pure smile. He had never told her she looked beautiful that day. He had told her nothing. He closed his eyes, desperately wishing he could hear her call his name just one more time. 3 months later, Austin, Texas. Grace pushed a high-end stroller along the Lady Bird Lake boardwalk. Mia was 3 months old, chubby, fair-skinned, and constantly smiling. Grace looked down at her daughter. She had Alexander's jawline, but it didn't matter. Her name was Mia Lawson. Lily walked up with 2 iced coffees. The Texas heat is no joke. Here. Grace took a sip. Lily, I accepted a job offer here in Austin, a VP of marketing position for a rising tech startup. The salary is fantastic. You're really hiding out here in Texas. He spent 3 months tearing Chicago apart. I couldn't stay. Austin is booming and I can blend in. I've already hired a live-in nanny. Lily sighed affectionately. Are you ever going to let another man into your life? Why would I? Grace smiled, looking at Mia. I have everything I need right here. I'm done with men. One day you'll go back to LA, Lily mused. I will, Grace said softly, staring out over the Colorado River. But when I do, I won't be Mrs. Kensington. I'll be Grace Lawson. And Alexander will realize exactly what he threw away. 3 years later, Los Angeles, California. Inside the Kensington Group boardroom, Alexander sat at the head of the table, his face severe as he listened to the quarterly reports. Over the past 3 years, he had fundamentally changed. He no longer stayed out late for business dinners. He was home by 7 p.m. every night. He had taped the shredded pages of his old notebook back together and locked it in a safe not to remember Vanessa, but as a punishing reminder of how his stupidity had cost him the best thing in his life. He had gone through 5 different private investigation firms. He knew Grace had moved to Austin, that she had a daughter, and that she was a marketing executive. But her precise address was shielded behind LLCs and trusts. She was incredibly good at protecting herself. His assistant knocked and entered. Mr. Kensington, are you attending the networking gala tonight at the Ritz-Carlton? Alexander was about to decline, but glanced at the invitation. The host was a rapidly growing e-commerce empire, specializing in premium maternity and baby products. Who's hosting a company called Grace International. The founder is a woman who recently relocated her headquarters from Texas to LA. She's a shark, sir. Built a unicorn valuation of over $1 billion in under 3 years. Alexander's heart hammered against his ribs. Grace International. What is her name? Grace Lawson. Alexander shot up from his chair so fast it tipped over backwards. When is the gala? 7 p.m. tonight, sir. It was 3 p.m. He grabbed his keys and sprinted to the private elevator. Cancel everything. At 7 p.m., the Ritz-Carlton ballroom was dazzling. Grace wore a sleek black Tom Ford evening gown. Her hair was styled in an elegant chignon, and a simple string of Mikimoto pearls graced her neck. 3 years of grinding as a startup CEO had stripped away her quiet timidity. She radiated power, confidence, and razor-sharp intellect. Holding her hand was a 3-year-old girl. Mia wore a pristine white dress, her hair in two little pigtails. She walked with a confident stride that mirrored her mother's. Mia Grace leaned down. Mommy has to talk to some boring business people. You sit right here and eat some cake, okay? Yes, Mommy. I'll be a good girl. Mia piped in a sweet, clear voice. Mia was not an average toddler. At 3, she was already reading chapter books and doing basic mental math. Grace had her IQ tested privately 140, a certified genius. The ballroom was packed with LA's elite. Many recognized Grace. Isn't that Alexander Kensington's ex-wife? She brought a kid. She built a billion-dollar company as a single mom. She looks completely different. Untouchable. Grace was gracefully navigating the room, chatting with investors when the heavy oak doors opened. Alexander walked in. He wore a midnight blue bespoke suit, clutching a massive, extravagant bouquet of red roses. The entire ballroom fell dead silent. Whispers erupted. Alexander walked straight toward Grace, his steps slightly unsteady. Grace saw him, but her expression didn't shift. No shock, no anger, no joy. Just polite indifference, as if he were a stranger. He stopped a few feet away. Grace. His voice was wrecked. Grace offered a perfectly calibrated, entirely fake corporate smile. Mr. Kensington. It's been a while. Mr. Kensington. Not Alex, not her husband. The formal title felt like a bullet to his chest. Grace, I've searched everywhere for you. Well, I commend your persistence, she replied breezily. He held out the roses. For you. Grace glanced at the flowers but didn't take them. I don't accept gifts from strangers, Mr. Kensington. I'm not a stranger. I'm your husband. Grace let out a melodic laugh. Mr. Kensington, we divorced 3 years ago. Did you lose the paperwork? My legal team can send another copy. I never signed it. And I never will. Suit yourself. In California, after 3 years of separation, the courts will grant a default judgment anyway. It's just a matter of filing the motion. At that moment, Mia hopped off her chair, walked over and stood between them. She tilted her head, looking up at the towering billionaire. Mommy, who is this man? Grace's eyes softened as she looked at her daughter. Just someone Mommy used to know, sweetie. Mia looked at the roses, then up at Alexander and delivered a line that made the entire ballroom gasp. Mister, you brought red roses. But my mommy is highly allergic to flower pollen. Didn't you know that? Alexander froze, the color draining from his face. A pollen allergy. In 3 years of marriage, he never knew she had a pollen allergy. Grace gently stroked Mia's hair. You see, Mr. Kensington. Even my 3-year-old daughter knows. But you don't. Mia stepped back, hiding halfway behind her mother's leg. You're the bad man who made my mommy cry. Alexander dropped to one knee, staring into the face of his daughter. His chest heaved. Yes, I was very bad, but I promise I will never do it again. I don't believe you, Mia said flatly. Mommy says men lie to get what they want. A few attendees failed to stifle their shocked laughter. Grace smiled unapologetic. Mia, don't be rude. Let's go. Alexander stood up, desperation in his eyes. Grace, please, we need to talk. This is a networking event, Mr. Kensington. If you want to discuss a B2B partnership, you can schedule an appointment with my executive assistant. With that, she took Mia's hand and walked away. Alexander stood alone in the center of the ballroom, gripping the rejected bouquet of roses. The thorns bit into his palms, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in his heart. She has a pollen allergy, he thought. 3 years, and I'm only learning this now. The gala resumed, the tension slowly bleeding out of the room as Grace seamlessly pivoted back to business mode. Alexander didn't leave. He stood by the bar nursing a scotch, watching her. He saw how she commanded attention, how she laughed effortlessly, and the tender way she wiped frosting from Mia's cheek. She was like a forged blade, sharp, brilliant, unbreakable. He wanted to punch himself for being so blind. Suddenly, the crowd parted again. A woman in a tight white dress strutted in. Vanessa Sinclair. She still possessed that perfectly manicured youthful beauty, though it was hardened now. She immediately spotted Alexander and practically glided over. Alex, it's been forever, she cooed. Alexander's eyes turned instantly hostile. What the hell are you doing here? I heard you were going to be here, so I pulled some strings to get on the list. I want to talk. We have nothing to talk about, Vanessa pouted. Don't be so cruel. After everything we meant to each other, we mean nothing, Alexander interrupted. Vanessa's facade cracked, but she maintained her sugary tone. Alex, I know you're mad that I left for Silicon Valley, but my dad was facing federal indictment for fraud. That tech CEO paid off the debts. I did it for my family. I don't care why you left. Vanessa bit her lip, forcing tears into her eyes. I'm divorced, Alex. He took everything. Every single day for the past 2 years, I thought only of you. Alexander stared at her, suddenly feeling an overwhelming urge to laugh. He had ruined his own marriage for this woman. He had ignored Grace for this. Vanessa, do you know what your little notebook cost me? She blinked, playing innocent. What notebook? The one I wrote in college. The one Grace found? She left me because of it. Vanessa's eyes darted nervously. I don't know what you're talking about. You don't. Alexander narrowed his eyes. I swear, Alex, I never touched your things. A sudden, horrifying thought struck Alexander. The notebook was hidden in a box in his office. Grace only found it because she was looking for a hospital bag. Martha knew about the notebook, but Martha loved Grace. She would never deliberately hurt her. Unless… Mr. Kensington, haven't you figured it out yet? A cool voice came from behind them. Alexander spun around. Grace stood there, holding a glass of champagne. That notebook was planted, Grace said smoothly. By who? Alexander demanded. Grace looked dead at Vanessa. Vanessa flinched. Why are you looking at me? I had nothing to do with it. Grace leisurely pulled out her iPhone, tapped the screen, and played an audio file. The unmistakable voice of Martha, the housekeeper, played through the speaker. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I have to confess something. That notebook, you didn't find it by accident. A woman came to the house a few days prior. She gave me an envelope with $2,000 in cash. She said she was an old friend of Mr. Kensington and asked me to put the notebook in the baby storage box so you would find it when packing your hospital bag. I was struggling with my mortgage and I got greedy. Please don't blame Mr. Kensington. He had no idea. The recording ended. Vanessa's face was ashen. Grace stepped closer to her. You orchestrated the whole thing 3 years ago. You heard Alexander got married, your own marriage was falling apart, and you wanted a backup plan. You knew I was 8 months pregnant, hormonal and fragile. You knew if I saw that notebook I would leave him. You wanted to clear the path so you could slide right into my spot. Vanessa was hyperventilating, backing away. You're crazy, that audio is fake, you have no proof. Are Martha's sworn testimony and the wire transfer records of the $2,000 from a Shell account linked to your name not enough proof? Grace smiled ruthlessly. Think the IRS and the LAPD wouldn't trace it. Alexander looked like he had been struck by lightning. He turned slowly to Vanessa, his voice a lethal whisper. Is it true? Tears streamed down Vanessa's face. Alex, I just loved you so much I couldn't stand that you married some nobody. I'm sorry. I'll fix it. Get out! Alexander snarled, his voice vibrating with absolute disgust. You destroyed my family! Sobbing hysterically, Vanessa fled the ballroom. The crowd murmured, having witnessed the spectacular downfall of a socialite. Grace slipped her phone back into her clutch. She looked at Alexander. Well, there's the truth, Mr. Kensington. But remember this. Vanessa planted the book, but you wrote the words. No one forced you to write 12 pages of devotion. You didn't love me. That is a fact. No audio recording can change. With that, she turned on her heel and walked away. Alexander tried to follow her, but his feet felt glued to the marble floor. She was right. Vanessa was a snake, but the betrayal was his own doing. Grace walked into a private VIP lounge and closed the door. Mia was sitting on a plush sofa eating a strawberry. Seeing her mother, she reached her arms out. Grace picked her up and hugged her tightly. Mommy, who was that bad lady? A very mean woman. But Mommy beat her, Grace smiled. Mommy is the strongest, Mia cheered, clapping her little hands. Grace kissed her cheek. The night she left Los Angeles in the pouring rain, she swore no one would ever walk all over her again. And tonight, she proved it. The next morning, Alexander sat in his office, completely sleep-deprived. He had ordered his security team to pull all files on Vanessa. The results confirmed everything Grace said. Vanessa had flown to LA for 3 days right before Grace left. The bank records matched perfectly. He threw the dossier across the room. He wanted to call Grace, but he still didn't have her number. He called Lily. This time, she didn't hang up immediately. Lily, please! I just want to sit down with Grace and apologize. She told me to give you a message, Lily said coldly. What is it? She's doing phenomenal. She doesn't need your apology, and she formally requests that you stop harassing her and her daughter. She is my daughter too. Her name is Mia Lawson. You haven't paid a dime in child support. You haven't bought her a single diaper, and you haven't been a father for a single second of her life. You have no rights. Alexander felt a physical pain in his chest. If you actually feel guilty, Alex, do her a favor and disappear. Those are her words. The line went dead. A month later, Grace's company hosted a massive International Child Innovation Expo at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Alexander attended as a platinum sponsor. He didn't care about the business. He just needed an excuse to see them. The convention center was packed with tech journalists and industry leaders. Grace stood on the main stage in a tailored crimson pantsuit giving a flawless keynote. Today, aside from our new product lines, we have a special demonstration. My daughter Mia, who is 3.5, will perform a little experiment. A murmur of amusement rippled through the crowd. A toddler doing a science experiment. Mia walked onto the stage. She was wearing a tiny white lab coat and oversized safety goggles. She looked entirely serious. Walking up to a table lined with beakers, she grabbed a microphone. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mia Lawson. Today, I'm going to demonstrate an exothermic chemical reaction known as elephant toothpaste. The audience chuckled, affectionately charmed by the tiny scientist. Mia didn't miss a beat. She poured concentrated hydrogen peroxide into a large flask, added dish soap, and a few drops of blue food coloring. Finally, with total precision, she poured in a potassium iodide catalyst. Instantly, a massive, steaming column of blue foam erupted from the flask, shooting into the air like a geyser. The crowd erupted in genuine cheers and applause. A 3-year-old had just executed a high school chemistry experiment flawlessly. During the Q&A, a reporter from Wired raised his hand. Mia, who taught you how to do that? Mommy bought me an AP chemistry textbook. I read it myself. You understood it. The reporter laughed in disbelief. Mia tilted her head. I had to use the dictionary for some of the multisyllable words, but yeah, the math is pretty basic. The room erupted in loud gasps and applause. 3.5 years old, looking up college-level words in a dictionary. Sitting in the front row, Alexander stared at the brilliant little girl. His eyes burned with unshed tears. This was his blood, his daughter, and he had missed all of it. The investor sitting next to him recognized him and whispered, Alex, isn't that your kid? Alexander swallowed hard. Her last name is Lawson. He couldn't take the applause anymore. He stood up and rushed out into the hallway, leaning against the cold concrete wall and sliding down to the floor. The child will have no association with the Kensington family. She hadn't said it in a fit of rage. She had executed it flawlessly. Mia was a genius, a marvel, but she wasn't a Kensington. After the presentation, Grace and Mia walked backstage. Alexander was waiting by the exit. Grace tried to walk past him, but he blocked the way. Grace, please, let me just talk to Mia. Grace looked down at her daughter. Mia, this man wants to speak to you. Do you want to? Mia thought about it then, nodded. Okay. Alexander dropped to his knees, coming eye level with her. Her face was a perfect blend of his and Grace's. Mia, do you know who I am? You're my biological father. Alexander Kensington, CEO of the Kensington Group. Alexander choked on a sob. You know, Mommy doesn't lie to me. She said you did bad things, so she left to protect us. I know the whole story. Tears finally spilled over Alexander's cheeks. He, a ruthless corporate titan, was crying in front of a toddler. Mia reached into her little lab coat, pulled out a tissue, and handed it to him. Don't cry. Mommy says crying doesn't solve logistical problems. Alexander took the tissue, his hands shaking. Mia, Daddy is so sorry. I was wrong to your mother and I was wrong to you. An apology without a change in behavior is just manipulation, Mia said, quoting a psychology book she had clearly read. If you want forgiveness, you have to prove it with data. What do you want me to do? Mia looked back at Grace. Grace gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Mia turned back to Alexander. Mommy says she forgives you for the past, but she is never coming back to you. She has her own empire now, and she doesn't need to depend on anyone. Alexander looked up at Grace. Grace stepped forward, taking Mia's hand. She's young, but I taught her to understand reality. We are very happy, Alexander. You don't need to try and compensate out of guilt. The best thing you can do for us is to stay out of our way. Alexander slowly stood up. Is there really no chance for us? Alexander, ask yourself something, Grace said quietly. Do you actually love me? Or are you just obsessed with me because I'm a possession you lost? Because for 3 years you weren't looking for Grace the person. You were looking for your obedient wife to fill the empty space in your mansion. Alexander had no counterargument. It hit him like a freight train. When you figure out the difference, Grace said with a small smile, let me know. But by then, I'll probably be living a completely different life. She led Mia down the hallway. After a few steps, Mia turned around and waved her little hand. Bye, Alexander. Alexander stood frozen. She had called him her biological father, but in the end, she just called him Alexander. In the back of their chauffeured Escalade, Mia snuggled into Grace's side. "Mommy, why won't you forgive him?" "It's not about forgiveness, sweetie," Grace said, stroking her hair. "I just refuse to go back to that life." "What life?" "A life where I was a ghost in my own home, where the staff laughed behind my back and my husband was in love with a memory. I went to the doctor alone. I carried you alone. I won't ever put myself in a cage again." Mia hugged her mother tightly. "I'll protect you, Mommy. When I win my Nobel Prize, I'll buy you a house 10 times bigger than his." Grace laughed out loud. "I'll hold you to that." Back at the Kensington group, Alexander's assistant handed him a tablet. Sir Vanessa Sinclair just posted a massive confession on X and Instagram. Alexander looked at the screen. The post was titled, "I ruined a family. I'm sorry, Grace." Faced with the threat of federal wire fraud charges for her bribe, Vanessa had panicked and tried to win back the court of public opinion. She detailed exactly how she bribed the housekeeper to plant the notebook, calculating that the hormonal stress would cause an 8-month pregnant woman to flee. She ended it with, "I thought I was a mastermind, but I ended up with nothing. Alex hates me and my reputation is ruined. I deserve it." The internet exploded. The post went viral, racking up millions of views. What a psycho. She tried to stress out a pregnant woman. Grace Lawson is an absolute queen for building a billion-dollar company out of spite. Alex Kensington is trash too. Didn't even know his wife had a pollen allergy. Pathetic. Grace's PR team showed her the trending topics. She barely glanced at it. "Let them talk. It doesn't affect our Q3 earnings." That evening, the doorbell rang at Grace's Beverly Hills home. She opened the door to find Vanessa standing on the porch looking haggard and desperate. "Grace, I came to beg for mercy. Please don't press charges." Grace leaned against the doorframe. "I don't accept your apology." Vanessa fell to her knees on the porch, sobbing. "If you don't forgive me, I'm ruined in this town. I have nothing." Grace looked down at her with absolute apathy. "Vanessa, whether you kneel or not is your business. Forgiving you is mine. And frankly, you aren't worth the energy it takes to hate you. You are entirely irrelevant to my life." "You know he never loved you," Vanessa shrieked defensively through her tears. "He only ever loved the memory of me. I just wanted what was mine." "Have you ever considered," Grace said, her voice dropping to a terrifying calm, "that you ended up with nothing because of your own choices? You chose to marry that Silicon Valley billionaire for his money. You chose to try and steal a married man. You chose to play dirty. You made every single bed you're currently sleeping in. Don't blame the universe for the consequences of your own greed." Vanessa slumped against the pillar, speechless. "Get off my property. I won't ruin you because you've already done it yourself." Grace shut the door in her face. Mia trotted into the foyer. "Did you slay the dragon?" Mommy Grace picked her up, laughing. "I sure did. And one day, you'll be just as fierce." The next morning, Alexander held a live press conference. He stood before a sea of cameras and took full accountability. "The failure of my marriage to Grace Lawson is 100% my fault. I was neglectful, emotionally unavailable, and foolishly clinging to the past. I allowed my pregnant wife to suffer in isolation." A reporter shouted, "Mr. Kensington, what is your message to Grace today?" Alexander looked directly into the camera lens. "Grace, I am so sorry. I am not asking you to take me back. I only ask for the chance to see my daughter. I was a terrible husband, but I want to try to be a good father." Grace watched the broadcast from her office. She tapped her pen against her desk, silent. "Are we issuing a response statement?" her PR director asked. "No. What about his request to see Mia Grace's side? I'll let Mia decide. She's smarter than most adults anyway." That night, Grace asked Mia. Mia tilted her head, tapping her chin. "I suppose I can give him a 1-day probationary trial." "Why?" "Because he looked really sad on TV, and I want to observe a billionaire CEO in his natural habitat." Grace chuckled. "All right. I'll text Lily to set it up." When Lily got the text, she immediately replied, "Did hell freeze over? Are you going soft?" Grace texted back, "Not me. Mia. The kid is just like you, tough on the outside, a total softie on the inside." Grace put her phone down and looked out at the glowing LA skyline. 3 years ago, she thought the pain would kill her. But seeing Alexander publicly beg for forgiveness didn't bring her satisfaction or pity. It just made her mourn the girl she used to be, the girl who had loved him so much. Saturday, a private booth at the Polo Lounge in Beverly Hills. Alexander arrived an hour early. He had changed clothes 5 times, settling on a navy blue cashmere sweater to look less intimidating. On the table, he had arranged a top-tier imported chemistry set and a giant plush bear. Grace had stipulated a strict 2-hour window. She would sit at the adjacent table, observing but not interfering. The door opened. Grace walked in, holding Mia's hand. Mia wore a pink hoodie and jeans, her hair in a messy bun. Daddy Mia smiled when she saw him. The word hit Alexander like a physical blow. His eyes instantly welled up. Grace knelt down. Mommy is right over there, okay? Have fun. Yell if you need me. Mia ran over to Alexander. He caught her in a desperate, shaking hug. 3 years, 4 months, and 7 days. That's how long he had waited to hold his child. Daddy, you smell nice, Mia said, patting his shoulder. I wore the cologne your mom used to buy me, Alexander said thickly. Mommy hates that smell now. She says it smells like depression. Alexander winced. Then I'll throw it out tonight. Mia climbed into the booth and her eyes lit up at the chemistry set. Whoa, a borosilicate glass beaker set. She immediately began inspecting the equipment. Alexander watched her mesmerized. She was so much like Grace, hyper-focused, determined, with a stubborn spark in her eyes. After 30 minutes of playing, Mia suddenly looked up. Daddy, do you still love Vanessa? Alexander was caught completely off guard. Mommy told you about her. Mommy said you wrote 12 pages about her in a book. But then she did a bad thing and you didn't love her anymore. So, do you love Mommy? Alexander hesitated, then spoke with absolute sincerity. I do. More than anything. But I was blind. I didn't realize it until she was gone. Mia tilted her head, looking at him with an intensity that belonged to a much older person. Daddy, Mommy says, loving someone isn't about realizing they're important after you lose them. Real love is when their happiness is more important to you than your own. Alexander stopped breathing. You made Mommy very sad, Mia continued. So you didn't really love her. If you want to love her now, you have to want her to be happy even if it doesn't include you. Alexander pulled his daughter into another hug, burying his face in her shoulder. This time he let the tears fall freely. When the 2 hours were up, Grace walked over. Mia had fallen asleep against Alexander's chest, her tiny fist gripping his cashmere sweater. She's out cold, Alexander whispered, looking up with red bloodshot eyes. I don't want to wake her. Grace sighed and gently scooped Mia into her arms. The toddler mumbled in her sleep and nuzzled into her mother's neck. She really liked you, Grace said softly. Can I see her every week? Grace thought about it. Yes, as long as you don't disrupt her schedule. I won't. I swear to God I won't. Grace turned to leave. Grace, Alexander called out. She paused. I won't harass you anymore. I'm going to let you go. But thank you. Thank you for raising her to be so incredible. She's my daughter. It's my privilege, Grace replied, and walked out of the restaurant. Alexander stood alone in the empty booth. This time, he didn't try to chase her. He sat back down, put his head in his hands, and wept. 1 year later, Wall Street, New York. Grace International was officially going public. Standing on the podium above the trading floor of the NASDAQ, Grace wore a striking crimson power suit, her hair flowing freely over her shoulders. Her smile was blindingly confident. Standing on a stool next to her was 4-year-old Mia, wearing a matching red dress, holding the ceremonial gavel. Together, mother and daughter struck the bell. Confetti rained down as the trading floor erupted in massive cheers. The stock opened up 40%. Sitting in the VIP gallery, Alexander watched them. He clapped louder than anyone else. His eyes never left the radiant woman on the balcony. She was no longer his wife, but she was an icon, a brilliant CEO, an incredible mother, and a woman the entire world admired. Later that evening, Grace gave an interview to CNBC. Grace, looking back at your departure from the Kensington family, do you ever have any regrets? None at all, Grace smiled at the camera. If I had stayed, I'd still be folding shirts in a mansion in Bel Air. Today I have an empire, a genius daughter, and a team I love. Marrying into billions didn't give me anything I couldn't build myself. What is your relationship with Mr. Kensington now? We are Mia's parents. We are not partners. He has his life and I have mine. We are parallel lines that will never intersect again. Alexander watched the interview from his hotel room. He didn't react with anger or sorrow. He had finally accepted it. Some people once lost can never be found again. That night, Grace and Mia returned to their luxury penthouse in Manhattan. As the private elevator doors opened into their foyer, Mia suddenly said, Mommy, I think Daddy still really loves you. What do you know about love, little one? Grace teased. I know things. He looks at you like you're magic. Grace didn't answer. She walked toward her front door. She spoke so softly that Mia barely heard her. Sometimes people love you, and you don't know it. And by the time you realize it, the love is already gone. What did you say, Mommy? Nothing, Grace smiled. Mia, what do you want to be when you grow up? A scientist. And after I win the Nobel Prize, I'm buying you that giant house. I'm holding you to that. As they reached the front door, Grace looked down. Sitting perfectly in the center of the welcome mat was a massive, stunning bouquet of baby's breath. A flower with no pollen, completely hypoallergenic. Attached was a small, elegant card. Grace picked it up. Grace, congratulations on the IPO. These won't trigger your allergies. I checked with a botanist. You don't need to reply. I just wanted you to know that there will always be someone cheering for your success. Alex. Grace stood there holding the card for a long time. Mommy, is that from Daddy? Yes, Grace said, slipping the card into her designer handbag. She didn't throw it away. She appreciated the gesture. She accepted the peace offering. But as she unlocked the door and guided Mia inside, she left the bouquet of baby's breath sitting outside on the hallway console table. She didn't bring the flowers inside, because the new life she had built, the life that started on that rainy night in Los Angeles 3 years ago, no longer needed anyone else's flowers to be beautiful. She could buy her own flowers. She could shine all on her own.